It's such an amazing feeling. I've been thinking about space and rockets and propulsion since I was 5. I actually know more about rockets than I do about e-commerce, because that's where I started.
I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin at Blue Origin's Rocket Park, where we're here for an exclusive and rare interview with Jeff Bezos, the founder of Blue Origin and, of course, the founder of Amazon. We talk about everything: the economy, artificial intelligence, jobs, politics, policy, space, and, of course, wealth in America.
I think what's going on is that it's kind of a tale of two economies. So you have a bunch of people in this country who are doing really well, but you also have a bunch of people in this country who are struggling to pay rent,
Right.
groceries. And so what's happening here is politicians are using the kind of age-old technique. So there's this tale of two economies, and they're using this age-old technique of, picking a villain and pointing fingers. But the problem is that doesn't solve anything. And so, if you want to help the group of people who are struggling, you have to figure out real root causes and solutions, and that takes skill. It's like the way if we have a problem at Amazon, the way we would fix it is we would go in and we'd do the 5 whys, and we'd try to get to a root cause. We'd try to find a root fix. And then when we fix it at the root, you're fixing it forever. It's
Right.
a real solution. And what we don't do, because it doesn't work, is just point fingers and blame people. It might feel good for 10 seconds, but doesn't accomplish anything. And so what could you really do? So,
That's what I was gonna ask. Do you have a plan?
I have some ideas. I have some places to start. So, I started thinking about this and doing some research. A nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year pays more than $12,000 a year in taxes. Does that really make sense? So people talk about making the tax system more progressive. How about we start by having the nurse in Queens not pay taxes? Why is a nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year paying more than $1,000 a
Right.
month in taxes? That's $1,000 a month that could help with rent or groceries or anything. And so, and by the way, do you know what that all adds up to? The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%. So we don't have, it's a small amount of money for the
Right.
government, that. And really, and the more I thought about it, to me, it's kind of absurd that we're doing this. We shouldn't be asking this nurse in Queens to send money to Washington. They should be sending her an apology. It really makes no sense.
Okay, but then on the other end, the question is, should you be paying higher taxes to pay for the 3% component part of this that you think is going to need to be paid for, if not more than that, given the debts we have?
It's certainly a perfectly valid policy debate.
Right.
To say, do we want an even more progressive tax system? So, the kind of the line that gets quoted all the time is, the wealthy should pay their fair share.
Right.
And we can argue about what the fair share is. That's a policy debate. That's okay. But the vilification is the thing that's just
Right.
the distraction. And by the way, if you really are being honest about it, we don't have a revenue problem in this country. We already have the most progressive tax system in the world. The top 1% of taxpayers pay 40% of all the tax revenue. The bottom half pay only 3%. We have already, and I think it should be 0. I don't think it should be 3%.
Right.
I think it should be 0. So we'd be making it more progressive that way. We actually have a spending problem, and that's a skills issue. I mean, let me give you an example. The New York City school system.
Right.
They spend $44,000 per student. $44,000. That's 30% more per student than other big cities like Chicago LA, and Boston. And it's 3 times more than Miami and Houston. And by the way, New York City doesn't get better outcomes.
But
So listen, let me just say, if we ran Amazon the way New York City runs their school system,
right,
your packages would take 6 weeks to arrive. We'd have to charge you a $100 delivery fee. And then when the package did finally arrive, it'd have the wrong item in it anyway.
Right.
We can't, that's a skills issue, Andrew. It's not about, it's just competence.
But there's also a question about, there's teachers unions in New York, for example.
None of this money is getting to the teachers. I promise you, if you're charging $44,000 per student, how much of that money do you think is trickling down to teachers? Not much.
And so you don't think it's about creating a livable wage for the teacher? I mean, that's part of the issue is sort of how do you create this livable wage,
by the way,
affordability issue?
More of that, they could, that amount of spending should come down and more of it should go to the teachers. It's just that if you look at the level of administration in the New York public school system, it's off the charts. It's like they have all these middle managers and senior leaders. The money does not get to the teachers.
Let me ask you a question, though, about great wealth, though. And the other issue on the tax front is whether people of great means at the very, very top end, and Elizabeth Warren has made this point repeatedly, I think she's made it in reference to you and others, are able to pay a lower tax rate, even though you're paying an enormous sum in taxes, a lower tax rate than maybe I am.
These people sometimes say that I don't pay taxes. It's not true. I pay billions of dollars in taxes. And it's a perfect, again, if people want me to pay more billions, then let's have that debate. But don't pretend, that's going to solve the problem. You could double the taxes I pay, and it's not going to help that teacher in Queens. I promise you. So you can't connect those two things, not logically. There are more examples. Why is rent expensive? Why is rent so expensive? I recently saw somebody blamed it on Airbnb. Okay, Airbnb is not the cause of expensive rent. In fact, it's been almost, let me finish here 1 sec. It's already been outlawed in New York City, and rents are still very high. So we know Airbnb isn't causing high rents. What's really causing high rent is government intervention. We subsidize demand with things like tax policy, which is fine, but at the same time, we constrain supply. We constrain supply with things like zoning and permitting. Why does it take so long to get something permitted to build? If you want rents to come down, Econ 101, really simple. You need to, you can't sort of subsidize supply, subsidize demand and constrain supply. If you do, prices are going to skyrocket. But this is not anybody's fault other than government policy. And this is fixable. Again, this is a skills issue.
Well, let me ask you about government policy, though, because the other piece of the argument is that the wealthy have extraordinary influence over government policy and have too much influence over government policy. By the way, over tax policy, over housing, over all of it.
What I would say is that we have way too much corporate welfare, way too much corporate subsidies. We have, there's way too much influence in politics from business, in some cases, wealthy people who really focus on that, unions. There's a bunch of people interfering in the political process. And if we can make that better, we should do that too. And
therefore, the question is, should people like you in your position advocate ways to fix it? I mean, one of the things people talk about is this policy of what they call buy, borrow, die. This idea that you can take assets that you have, stock, and get loans against them.
As far as I know, there's no truth to this buy, borrow, die thing. I don't even know where this comes from. And you can look at, I'm selling Amazon stock routinely, and that's how I fund Blue Origin and Prometheus and a bunch of other things, and investments in small companies that I'm doing. So every time I sell,
by the way, it may not be you.
I pay taxes on that.
But there are other people. By the way, Elon Musk, who takes extraordinary loans against his stock, and as a result isn't paying taxes in that moment. Now, when he sells stock, he pays.
And this is, again, can we fix that? If that's a true loophole, I'm a little skeptical that that's a true loophole. But if it is, can we fix it? Then we should. I don't think such a loophole should exist. But I want to get back to my primary point. When you fix that loophole, it's not going to help that.
It's not going to solve the full problem.
That nurse in Queens it's not going to help her at all.
Let me ask you about the anger, because there seems to be anger, at least from certain political sides of this. And AOC recently said in a podcast, I'm just so curious how you think about this, says there's a certain level of wealth and accumulation that is unearned, she says. You can't earn $1 billion. You just can't earn that, she says. You can get market power, you can break rules, you can abuse labor laws, you can pay people less than what they're worth, but you can't earn that.
Yeah.
You, by the way, you've earned an extraordinary amount of money. You employ largest employer, if not one of them, in the whole country. When you read that, what do you think?
Well, it's not correct on its face. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say you start a burger joint and you have 10 employees, and you make a little bit of money until you have this one outlet. And by the way, these are the most delicious burgers in the world. People love your burgers, Andrew. And so then you open a second outlet.
Right.
And now you're making a little bit more money, and you have 20 employees, and you open a third outlet. By the time you've opened 1,000 outlets, you are a billionaire.
Right.
And by the way, this is a real life story. It happens all the time. It's In-N-Out Burger. It's Raising Cane's chicken. At what point did that money all of a sudden become unethical? Or it didn't. There was one outlet, and then there were two, and then there were three. What you're doing, the way you make $1 billion or $100 million or $10 million or anything, is you create a service that people love. And if millions of people choose your service, you're going to end up with $1 billion.
Right.
And you can just try it with a chicken franchise.
Do you think, though?
But your chicken has to be good.
But there's the question of whether the people who are working at the burger joint ultimately should be paid more. That's what creates the affordability gap.
Well, by the way, that's also, if you want to change the minimum wage, change the minimum wage. Amazon, we have our entry-level wage for in Queens is $23 an hour, and that works up to be like $52,000 a year. And this is an entry-level job, doesn't require any educational attainment, it doesn't require any pre-existing skills. We will train you. It's actually a great first job. On day one, you get full health care, the same health care program that our senior executives get, the same one I'm on. And so this is actually a fantastic entry-level job, $23 an hour. But guess what? They're still charging that person more than $10,000 in taxes.
The piece is that we have a big budget gap. And so whether you're the federal government or whether you're a city, I mean, I was going to ask you about what you thought of the pied-à-terre tax in New York and what you thought of what's happened with this Ken Griffin video that the mayor made. Well, you have a place in the city.
Yeah, there's two different, I think there are two different things about that video. On the one hand, it's perfectly fine to have a policy debate about whether you want to have a pied-à-terre tax.
Right.
The second piece, which is not so good, is to go stand in front of Ken Griffin's house and act like he's some kind of villain. Ken Griffin isn't a villain. He hasn't hurt anybody. He's not hurting New York. In fact, quite the opposite. Right. And so that piece of it isn't right, and there was no reason to do that. But I think that the pied-à-terre tax is a fine thing for New York to do. And they have to figure out how, but it's a policy debate.
Right.
Policy debates don't have to be finger pointing.
What do you think personally? I mean, you read these headlines, you see your name in them, whether it's the Met Gala, protests.
Yeah.
On a personal level, what do you personally think of all this? I know we're talking about policy.
Well, on a personal level, I think of my parents. And I think of how they uplifted me. I think of where they started. I think, my dad is a Cuban immigrant. He came to this country right after Castro took over, and he was a 16-year-old boy who didn't speak a word of English. He came all by himself. His parents weren't allowed to leave. He was in a refugee camp in the Everglades, and he built himself up. My mom had me she was in high school. She was a 17-year-old mom. It wasn't cool to be a pregnant mother in high school in Albuquerque, New Mexico in 1964, and she brought herself up. And so I look at that and I think, I want to make sure that the people who are struggling today have a chance to do that too, to bring themselves up, and maybe they're going to be the next Steve Jobs. Maybe they're going to be, maybe one of their kids will be the next Steve Jobs. I don't know, but we can give them a better chance by eliminating their tax bill. I don't want to reduce it. I want to eliminate it. I think there's something very powerful about zero. It's part of our job as citizens and as business leaders to share our ideas. And this one would actually help people. Even though I'm going to give away the majority of my wealth, if I do my job right, the value to society and civilization from my for-profit companies would be much, much larger than the good that I do with my charitable giving.
Let me ask you a social compact question between wealth. I mean, part of this is a social compact issue between the wealthy and the less wealthy. And Warren Buffett has said how hard it is to give money away.
Yeah.
He's not even sure that his kids in their generation are going to give it away. He's already starting to prepare to find the next generation to give it away.
Yeah.
How are you going to do it?
Well, I give away billions of dollars to charitable causes, and I'm going to continue to do that. I'm going to give away most of my wealth in my lifetime.
But that's going to be hard.
But
you have to give a lot away.
It's hard,
quickly.
and it's also hard to do well. It's easy to do poorly.
Right.
And in my view, you don't want to create dependence with your wealth. One of the things I fund that I really, really like is family homeless shelters. I give about 100 million or so every year to 30 or 40 different family homeless shelters. These are usually women with children. The motto that I have is "No child sleeps outside." And I really like these because they build independence.
How are you going to do that at scale? I mean, $280 billion
well, I
and
want to
maybe
say
more.
One more thing about this, but I want to make one more point here, which I think is really important. Even though I'm going to give away the majority of my wealth, if I do my job right, the value to society and civilization from my for-profit companies will be much, much larger than the good that I do with my charitable giving. And so if you create a company, Blue Origin will create tremendous value for the world. Prometheus will create tremendous value for the world. And Amazon has already created tremendous value for the world, and I hope it will continue to create even more. It's not just the consumer side, it's with AWS too. But this is such an important point. I really want people listening to this to think about that for-profit companies properly run create tremendous value for the world, and they're self-sustaining and they draw competition. If you can do something with the for-profit model, you should.
I was going to ask you about the news market.
Yeah.
Because you own the Washington Post.
Yes.
And one of the critiques, by the way, and this is maybe the wealth critique and everything else, is we just said the company laid off about 30% of its staff.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people out there who said, Jeff's super wealthy. He's talked about this being a public trust. It's something that he bought early on, how much you care about that piece of it. Why lay people off? Why fire people? Why do you need to subsidize the business if, in fact...
Because the Post needs to be a profitable enterprise that stands on its own 2 feet. It needs to be...
Does it?
Yes.
I mean, that's the question. Some people say it should be a trust.
And let me tell you why.
Okay.
Because it's a measure of its relevance. If people won't pay for our product, it's not a good enough product. It's like, doing... it would be like poetry without rhyming. It's too easy. So it's got to be something that people will pay for, because that's a signal.
Right.
It's a signal that we're providing a relevant service. Your paper, the New York Times, you guys make a ton of money. You guys are doing very well financially, and you're providing a service that people are willing to pay for. We can do that too. And guess what I told them, when we were planning those layoffs?
Right.
I didn't pick who was going to get laid off or which departments. I said, follow the data. Follow the data. And I said, there's one exception to this.
What's that?
Don't follow the data on investigative reporting. The heart of the Post is investigative reporting. And guess what? Our newsroom today, even after the layoffs, is still larger than when we did Watergate and the Pentagon Papers. And we just won the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service, the most prestigious prize, prestigious Pulitzer for our investigation into Doge. The Post is going to continue to be an important institution. In fact, it's going to be a more important institution because of this financial discipline.
Do you want to own it? And the reason I ask is you've talked about how you are, by default, to some degree, a conflicted owner, given you own all of these other businesses. And
I think an ideal owner, yes. My vision is still to make sure the Post is when I bought the Post, it was very unprofitable when I bought it. The newsroom was even smaller than it is today. And we turned it around in 2 years, was profitable for 6 years. I put all that money back into the Post, grew the newsroom. So we've shrunk it back some now, but we haven't shrunk it back to what it was when I bought it.
There is a view among critics that say that part of what you have done or are doing is trying to placate the president with either the sort of shift in the tone of what's happening at the paper, or even some of the things at Amazon, the decision to make the documentary around Melania, for example.
Yes, the Melania thing is a falsehood that will not die.
Okay.
So I see reported all the time that somehow I was involved in this, and we did this at this Mar-a-Lago dinner.
Everybody thinks that you went to Mar-a-Lago.
Not true.
Not true.
We have denied it. Melania's office has denied it. It's not true. I had nothing to do with that. By the way, it appears it was a good business decision. It did very well in theaters. It's done very well on streaming. People are very curious about Melania. So even though I had nothing to do with it, it appears that the Amazon team made a very wise business decision. I also had nothing to do with Project Hail Mary, which I regret because it's an incredible success. I wished I had greenlit that, but I didn't. And so, Amazon's a big company. It makes a lot of decisions. But no, this idea that that somehow that is a way of buying influence is just not correct.
Every time you mentioned AI, they were booing because I think they're deeply fearful and worried about whether they're going to have a job.
Because of the productivity gains, you're going to be able to afford things. We're going to have, I predict we'll actually have deflation of certain core, assuming we let this technology play out and don't hamstring it with regulation too early.
When I last interviewed you, it was about 2 years ago, President Trump had just won. He was not the president yet. And I'd asked you what you thought of him at the time. And you said that you thought that he had mellowed, that he was calmer.
Yeah.
And I'm curious now, here we are.
Yeah. I still think that.
2 years later, we've had lots of we have wars and tariffs and all sorts of things that have happened since then. What do you think? I
think he has. I mean, I'm comparing him to his first term, and I think he is a more mature, more disciplined version of himself than he was in his first term. But we need our business leaders to provide input into the administration, regardless of who the president is. I'm not on the side. You know what? I'm on the side of America, and that is so important. And that's where business leaders should be. It's just.
And do you think they're not?
No, I think we are, but we get perceived as being partisan or whatever. I was helping Obama every chance I could. I was helping Biden every chance I could. I still call Obama for advice. He's a very smart guy, and and by the way, people that are. Trump has lots of good ideas, and he's been right about a lot of things. You have to give him credit where credit is due.
Let me pivot this whole conversation, if we could, to space, because we haven't really got there, and here we are in this. It's a mecca of sorts, and it's really a remarkable.
It's amazing
thing to behold.
This is what you're looking at here is billions of dollars of investment, and it's also. Employing 14,000 people, and it has an unbelievable future. It's very exciting.
You were early when you talked. I remember talking to you maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and you were talking about putting infrastructure in space.
Yes.
And I think you were even talking a couple of years ago about putting data centers potentially in space, even before Elon was talking about data centers in space.
Yes.
How realistic is that really? And what is the
very
timeline
realistic.
of that? Because right now there's a lot of excitement, by the way, around the SpaceX IPO in particular, because of this view that we're all going to be moving stuff to space.
Yeah. The question, are data centers in space realistic? The answer is yes. The timeline is harder to answer. So, some of the timelines you hear are very short. They're probably not right. People who talk about 2 or 3 years, that's probably a little...
Elon's talked about 2 or 3 years.
It's probably a little ambitious.
Right. Okay.
But I think what Elon would tell you is if you don't set an ambitious timetable, if you want it to be 6 years, say it's 3.
Right.
That's the kind of, so exactly how long it will take, I don't think anyone knows, but it is real. It will happen. And a couple of things need to happen for that to happen. Energy needs to become a bigger percentage of the cost of terrestrial data centers.
Okay.
So today, terrestrial data centers typically spend less than 15% of their kind of total cost of ownership on energy. And the biggest advantage to being in space is that the energy is free, right? You're getting solar energy 24/7,
right.
No clouds, no weather. And so that's a big energy, but 15% is not a huge number. So I predict over time the energy budget of a data center will go up. So the chips will get a little cheaper. Right now the chips are so expensive that the energy is not a big chunk. So that will probably change. And and then the second thing is that launch cost has to come down very significantly by a factor of 10. That's what we're working on right here. That's what Blue Origin is doing. And this team is on fire doing that.
If you're right about the data center piece, though, getting to space, does that change the equation for all the investment that's going on in data centers terrestrially on the ground right now?
No, I don't think so. Because again, the timeline is very different. And you're going to need as much terrestrial data center capacity, I think, as you can arrange in the near term. This technology is real, I mentioned my optimism a minute ago, and we should definitely talk about that because I think there's so many people who are afraid that AI is going to take their job. I think that there's going to be a labor shortage as a result. So
let's go there then. I wanted to stay in space, but let's go to that because
we can come back. We can be in space too, whatever you want.
Well,
Andrew.
but that's fascinating because I don't know if you saw Eric Schmidt gave a commencement address over the weekend, and the students were booing.
There is a fear.
Every time he mentioned AI, they were booing because I think they're deeply fearful and worried about whether they're going to have a job.
The reason they're afraid of that is because all these smart people keep saying that. So there are so many smart people, and they are smart, and they are saying, oh my God, there's going to be no more radiologists because, AI can read X-rays better than a radiologist can, and there are going to be no more software engineers because AI can program better than a software engineer can. These people are wrong. So what's really going to happen is that it's going to elevate all of these people, and there's going to. It's like you've been digging. Let's say you're a software engineer. Right. The analogy I can give you is you've been digging out a basement for your house with a shovel, and somebody's about to hand you a bulldozer. You should be so happy. If you're digging the basement to your house and somebody says, hey, how about this? I have a tool here that's going to, and what's really going to happen is we're going to have so much productivity in our economy that, for example, this is just one effect. A lot of people who have 2-earner income households, one of the people is going to drop out of the workforce. That's why we're going to have a labor shortage. People, because of the productivity gains, you're going to be able to afford things. We're going to have, I predict we'll actually have deflation of certain core, assuming we let this technology play out, and don't
Right.
hamstring it with regulation too early.
But how do you answer? I mean, Amazon's laid a whole bunch of people off. You heard Mark Zuckerberg.
Not because of AI.
Mark Zuckerberg recently laid a bunch of people off.
Is that because of AI?
Jack Dorsey has. Jack Dorsey ascribes it directly to AI.
Well, you'd have to talk to Jack about that. I don't know, but he must have had a lot of extra people.
The reason
We're not seeing those same kinds of things.
But
at
the reason
Amazon.
that people are talking about this is in the context of coding right now, and also in the context that for these companies to have the extraordinary valuation, I think that we're talking about, they have to create extraordinary productivity
Look,
gains.
can I give you a different lens to view this? So, if I'm a software engineer, I need to up-level and think to myself, what am I really doing? What is a good, computer scientist or software engineer? What we really do is we identify problems and we help solve them. And the code is almost just it's a piece of execution that helps with that.
Right.
But the real job is going to be identifying problems and helping to solve them. Does that make sense?
Totally.
And that's not going to go away, because that's the kind of thing that humans are going to be good at, is figuring out, oh, okay, we want this. And they're going to work with that tool to build the system. But we humans are never going to run out of problems, and we're never going to run out of the need for solutions. And it's just that the work is going to be done at a higher level. It's going to be done with a bulldozer instead of a shovel.
Right.
And that's going to be a good thing.
But there's an argument, or there's a concern about, there's the white-collar workers on one end, and then I was going to mention, you have a new company called Prometheus.
Yes. What we are doing is we're building an artificial general engineer. So when you go to design something, we're building tools that will make it much easier for engineers to design physical objects. So you've heard of CAD and so computer-aided design and so on. This is kind of like a very, very modern version of that. I'm really oversimplifying here, and it's premature for me to give much detail about Prometheus. Prometheus is something I got so excited about that I became the co-CEO of the company, putting a lot of time into it, a lot of energy into it, and it's going to be amazing. And this is that thing, as I say, 10,000 years ago, somebody invented the plow, and the whole world got wealthier. So the root of civilizational wealth is invention. So somebody invented the plow, we all got wealthier. Much later, somebody invented the steam engine, we all got wealthier. That's how this works.
And you don't think this time is different?
No, it's not different. It's even better. And so, and by the way, not only is this that these people should not be depressed, they should be energized, because this is a moment when when the possibilities are so large.
You're the executive chair at Amazon. How do you decide, for example, with Prometheus, I'm going to go, I don't know how much time you spend on that versus all these other things, like how you do it. And also, did you ever say to yourself, well, I'll put Prometheus inside of an Amazon, or I'll put Prometheus inside of a Blue Origin?
What I do, my through line for the last few years has been AI. And so, I've been on the machine learning track for, 15 years, and Amazon has made incredible use of machine learning. But a few years ago, we had a real breakthrough in machine learning, and we call that AI. And it has so much potential. So my time at Amazon is spent on AI. My time at Prometheus is spent on AI. Prometheus is really an AI company.
Right.
And my time at Blue is largely spent on AI. And Prometheus, by the way, the tools that we're building are going to help companies like Blue immensely.
And but rather than do it inside Blue, or rather than do it inside one of the others?
It deserves its own special focus. It's its own big idea. And Prometheus, you can get a lot of focus by having a separate company.
SpaceX is going public.
Yes.
Potentially at a $1.75 or $2 trillion valuation.
Yes.
By the way, there's a lot of people here who I think have stock in Blue that are very excited about that. I heard a little bit about that as I was walking through. What do you think about that valuation? Does that make sense to you?
It's hard to know how much of it is based on the financials, and how much of it is a bet on the future.
Right.
One thing I can tell you for sure is that space is going to be a gigantic industry. So in terms of particular, should it be 1.75 or 2 or 1.5 or 2.25? I don't know the answer to that question, but I know that space is going to be a gigantic industry. There is no doubt about this. 100 years from now, you won't believe what has happened. I would caution people who think it's all science fiction to be a little cautious with their judgment, because it is real, it is happening, and it's probably going to happen faster than most people think. Space travel is a solved problem since the 60s if you don't care about cost.
Right.
And so what we're trying to do here is all really about economics. We have to build a vehicle that not only does the mission, but does it inexpensively. And that unlocks a lot of progress for humanity if we can do that. And that's what SpaceX is working on. You know, people ask me sometimes, about SpaceX, and I would say, I think I'm very admiring of what SpaceX has done, and I want the world to have at least 2 SpaceXs.
Jeff, what are you holding? I wanted to see what that was. You had it on the side there before.
This is a solar cell that we at Blue Origin made out of lunar regolith. Lunar regolith is the dust on the surface of the moon. This is lunar regolith. This is a lunar regolith simulant.
Okay.
It has exactly the same composition as lunar regolith does, and we're working on making solar cells out of lunar regolith. And so the lunar regolith, fortunately, has a lot of silicon in it.
Right.
And so this is an actual solar cell that we produced with lunar regolith simulant.
And will this be on things that are ultimately on the moon or just in space?
It could be both. So ultimately, you may build data centers on the moon and power them with solar cells that you make on the moon. Alternatively, you can make the solar cells on the moon and then fling them into space in various ways and build data centers in space, but with materials from the moon. And if you use materials from the moon, you're accomplishing a couple of things. One, it's much more efficient to lift things off of the moon because the moon's gravity is very low. It takes 28 times less energy to lift a kilogram off the moon than it does to lift it off the Earth. And secondarily, it's the beginning of the process of moving heavy industry off Earth. Because this is the garden planet, and we want to keep nature here the way it is.
What's the timeline for you? You talk about lunar permanence, this idea of actually creating permanent, working environments on the moon.
Well, with NASA, we will be building a lunar base on the moon. Blue Origin has a big contract with NASA to build a lunar lander. And NASA is in the process of letting additional contracts now. NASA is really focused on the moon now. I've been focused on the moon for a really long time, and have been saying, let's do the moon, and then we'll do Mars. It's kind of step by step, but do the moon first. The moon is a gift. It has all these resources. It has water. It has eternal peaks of light. We can build a whole bunch of things on the moon.
The economics, though, for this business, at least in the short term, are about satellites. Right? I mean, it
can be about satellites and data centers. We have, Amazon has LEO, which is
formerly Kuiper.
That's right. And Blue Origin, we have 2 constellations in work. One is called TerraWave. It's a communications constellation with very high bandwidth. It serves a limited number of customers, but with very high bandwidth. So it's focused on government customers and big enterprises, hyperscalers. And then we have another constellation called Sunrise, and Sunrise is our data centers in space constellation. So for now, I would say yes. Most of these things are focused on low Earth orbit constellations. And then there's a third thing, which is national defense. So, the U.S. has always enjoyed strong superiority in space. That's something that you really do want to continue for the purposes of U.S. national security. And so we also focus a lot on that, too.
There are all sorts of wild things we hear about, things that could happen in space. There's the idea that you could put mirrors in space that would project the sun down 24 hours a day to power solar, for example. I mean, I don't know if it's 10 years, 20, or what do you think the timeline is where all of a sudden our kids are going to either be in space or be impacted in a meaningful way by all of this?
Well, I would argue you're already impacted meaningfully by space, and you have been ever since we had weather satellites. Right. So, the hurricanes don't sneak up on you anymore. Ever since we have had weather satellites, we've been in a way better position. Same thing with communication satellites, which we've also had, for many decades now. So space has been a factor. It's also been a factor in national security for many decades. But that's accelerating. And you see it with Starlink, the constellation that SpaceX has launched. You're going to see it with LEO. It's your timeline question. Look, it's going to be a gradual thing, but 100 years from now, you won't believe what has happened. And remember, the best way to think about 100 years is to think about Kitty Hawk.
Right.
And what happened, from that little Wright flyer that, only flew a few hundred feet. It wasn't very many decades before you had a 747.
Right.
And so I would caution people who think it's all science fiction to be a little cautious with their judgment, because it is real, it is happening, and it's probably going to happen faster than most people think.
Dave Limp, who runs Blue for you,
Yes.
There was a memo that leaked to the Financial Times. You're thinking of taking outside money for the
Yes.
first time.
Yeah.
So when's that going to happen? What does that look like?
Well, we finally have enough visibility into our future and our financial success that, I've funded Blue out of my own by selling Amazon stock to fund Blue. But it's a good time actually to start thinking about the future and bring on some other outside investors. So we're considering that.
So it's not happened yet.
It has not happened yet. The good ideas are getting funded, and the bad ideas are getting funded. And it's because investors at this moment haven't learned yet how to discriminate between good ideas and bad ideas. And that's okay, because the good ideas will pay for all of the losers.
You've lived through a whole bunch of economic cycles,
Yes.
including 1999.
Yes.
When people called, there were a lot of questions about whether Amazon was going to continue.
Yes.
Even. And so I'm curious where you think we are now in this economy, because there is a lot of excitement around AI, around space, but there's almost an exuberance about it too. And I'm curious if you think we're
in a phase where every experiment is getting funded. So what that means is the good ideas are getting funded and the bad ideas are getting funded. And it's because investors at this moment haven't learned yet how to discriminate between good ideas and bad ideas. And that's okay, because the good ideas will pay for all of the losers. So from a point of view of civilization, of society, these kind of industrial, cycles, can actually be very healthy because they drive the technology forward.
And so we shouldn't worry about being in a bubble.
No, even if it does turn out to be a bubble, you shouldn't worry about it because the bubble is driving investment, and a lot of the investment is going to turn out to be very healthy. It's like the biotech bubble. When it burst in the 1990s, a lot of investors lost money on certain things, but we still got to keep all the life-saving drugs that they had invented.
Jeff Bezos, thank you for a great conversation.
My pleasure,
for the
Andrew.
hour.
I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so very, very much.
That does it for us. This was a special presentation of our exclusive interview with Jeff Bezos. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin.